We're actually going to open this space up with about an 8-minute video titled Aloha Liliʻu, Celebrating Our Queen. This is on the Hawaii Pono'i Coalition website. We'll drop the resource in the chat. But we're going to use this video to kind of ground us in today's conversation, and then we'll just jump in from there. So Kiki, you can go ahead and start.
Liliʻuokalani was the last queen of Hawaii, and normally that's what the history books, begin and end with. In actuality, what she was and what she has become is much more than that. Because she served Hawaii as Hawaii's leader, ruler, at probably the most turbulent history, she obviously is probably the most judged of all the leaders of Hawaii because of the transitional page. So a lot of people judge what she did. She tried to restore, actually, democracy to Hawaii. Instead of creating a war with the United States, she chose to use diplomatic means and to step down. And as a result of that, because she did that, we are able today to continue the struggle that just happened 3 generations ago. She became a symbol for her people and a struggle to win back their rights. And so she has become for us a leader, even after her passing 100 years ago, a leader of doing what is right for Hawaii.
Today we honor Queen Liliʻuokalani. We are drawn here by our common love and our common respect for Hawaii's last queen. We acknowledge how keenly her passing affects us 100 years later, and how deeply her values of compassion, justice, forgiveness, and humanity can and must enter into all that we are and what we do. Her life represented the flowering of great intelligence, of love and duty and responsibility and creative beauty. Indeed, her life was very much embroiled in political turmoil, and we acknowledge that. For today, let our thoughts flow to the way injustice was responded to by our Queen Liliʻuokalani. Truth be told, if she had allowed her loyalists to defend the kingdom and fight to the end, many of us would not be here today. She stood down so we can stand up. And for that reason, we offer a special gratitude. Let us elevate, illuminate, and amplify her goodness.
Among her many exemplary deeds, the Queen left a legacy in the form of a trust for Hawaiian children, trusting that we would lead these children to create a legacy of their own. And when she did this, she changed the lives of thousands of our young Hawaiian beneficiaries. For over 100 years, the Queen's Trust and her children's centers have been a beacon of hope for children wandering in the darkness of despair.
My family and I had the privilege of spending 8 years living in the Queen's home in Washington Place. And while we were there was this large portrait in the dining room. And on the portrait of the Queen was this phenomenon. Her eyes were painted in such a way that they followed you everywhere. When I looked into her eyes, I knew that my Queen loved me. Not just people in general, that me, I am standing there. That compassion she had was for me and me alone. And that compassion is for each and every one of you. She did what she did because she loved you. Our Queen had so much compassion that she made it possible for us to be here today celebrating the 100th anniversary of her passing. In our hearts, she has not passed.
As a young Hawaiian, she is laying the path for me to walk in both worlds, how to remain true to our ancestors of the past, our kupuna, our culture, traditions, our history, yet advance, navigate, and explore in a modern world. Each generation has the obligation to set the bar higher than the previous one. As Hawaiians, we all have that choice of how to live our lives. If we can aspire to the qualities our Queen lived by, great things lie ahead for Hawaii, our people, and our keiki. Mahalo nui loa, Queen Liliʻuokalani. E oni pa'a kako.
Big breaths, big breaths. Just want to offer up Aloha la Hānau to our Queen, Liliʻuokalani. I'm going to open up this space to our panelists. I realize I never even said my inoa, but we'll get into it in our introductions. But first, I want to invite my hoa, I guess my friends now, Pumehana and Keoni, to kind of introduce ourselves in the way that we feel compelled to. So for us, we might be talking through who is our Vaikai, who is our Aina, who is our Kupuna, and our Inoa. So Keoni or Pumehana, whoever would like to start. Don't make me pick on you. Pumehana, you up.
Okay, I've been voluntold. Aloha, Kapo. My name is Megan Kumehana Cabral. I go by Kumehana or Kume. So I'm right now in Kiki, but my aina is Kulua, mostly, and Hiia, and yeah, Olau. My vai is Koinui and Kaelepulu in Pigua. So Pigua is the two waters. So those are the two. And yeah, I think that for today, I'm bringing with me my father, Lester Kumehana Cabral, and also calling in also our queen, obviously, really cool. And also want to just mahalo another puna that's been a big influence in my life on the Kaylin at Kapuna One. Mahalo for having me.
Haku o Josiah Jose John Rodriguez Colina, John Rodriguez Kumahane, Larina Pagama, Wahine, Haina, Mayai, Mayo, Hawaii, Hawaii, Aloha, Wahine. My name is Johnny Rodriguez. I come from John Rodriguez and Marina Pangina, from Antipolo City in the Philippines, and currently on the island of Oahu. My kupuna comes from the puna side of Hawaii and Ka'u and Kohala on Hawaii Island. But I was born and raised and nourished by the land and territory of Pumayai people, also known as San Diego, in the neighborhood of Mira Mesa. And I'm the oldest of four. I was really excited to share in this conversation with everybody. Oh, and I would also like to invite Kupuna Malaya Ta'ohu, one of the few people in my family line that I have seen in the Ha'e petitions, and just thinking about what that moment might have been for her as a Wahine, a Hawaiian woman during the time of the overthrow. So yeah, mahalo everyone.
Mahalo you too. So o Jessica Kaniokua ko Noah. My aina Hānau is Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I was born and raised and nourished on Dakota lands. But my aina now is here in Puna in Mountain View with my small little ohana that I'm growing out here. My kai vai, complicated question, because land of 10,000 lakes out in Minnesota. So my vai, I bring with me that vai. That's just like, that's how I was nourished. So I bring with me the vai in Minnesota. But my kai now, my ohana and I find ourselves often in the brackish waters in Keaukaha when we need space for healing. So that's my kai now. Aina is puna. My kupuna that I bring with me often is my dad. That's how I get my Kaneakua side. So my dad is Wilfred Chuchu Kaneakua from Papakolea on Oahu. But right now, actually, I'm sensing my tutu Kalovaya is here with me as well. I can feel her presence. My name, again, complicated. Growing up in Minnesota, I actually didn't know the meaning of my name. In fact, I didn't know how to pronounce my name correctly. So I've learned what Kaneakua means over time, and I take with me big kuleana now that I know, one, how to say my name, and two, what it means to be a man of God. And so, yes, very complicated, but a very healing kind of journey I've been on, learning my name. Yeah, and I dropped into the chat to really open up the space for you all to share in the chat. Who is your kaivai? Who is your aina? Who is your kupuna? And your name. So please feel free to drop that into the chat. Let's get into it, gang. So before we opened up this space, we actually were just talking through what do we want to share, what do we want to go through, and you know what, we said forget it, we're going straight to sovereignty. So I'm going to open up this space today for Keone and Pumehana. What does sovereignty mean for us? Now, you know, going through watching that video, seeing all that the Queen did for us and continues to do for us. What does sovereignty mean for the diaspora, and how is the diaspora invested in sovereignty within their spaces and places? And I'll drop that question into the chat too, if that's helpful.
Only as they kick us off this time.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex question, right? You know, and I mean, I think, you know, when we remember the Queen, we are wanting to remember that moment in 1993 and how she imposed herself during that time. And, you know, the events that happened have everything to do with sovereignty. And, you know, over 100 years later, as we celebrate the Queen's life, I think it's sort of, you know, every year, not only on the Queen's birthday, but on January 17th, on we are reminded what sovereignty is. And it's no mistake that all these sort of big Hawaiian days are about political independence. And so I think I really wanted to like kind of jump to that, like you're saying, Jessica, about, okay, well, this isn't just any conversation about the Queen or the monarchy. It's sort of couched in this understanding of diaspora. And that can be kind of hard to really get to, right? If you're separated from the place that you're trying to maybe exert or gain sovereignty or regain sovereignty over, then what is that supposed to mean? But I think, you know, as more and more Hawaiians are not only moving away from Hawaii, but growing up outside of Hawaii, this is a question we really need to answer as well. You know, even now, you know, one of the biggest examples of political sovereignty that have been extinguished from me and my family is a simple thing like voting in the Aloha elections, you know, and like, Aloha, they have these programs for Native Hawaiians. I'm a Native Hawaiian, but I don't get to vote. But other people get to vote who are not Hawaiian. And so I think about how much of our sovereignty is not just about, oh, I get to control these like government mechanisms, but really like who has control over me, you know, and like when it's Hawaiians, you know, I can be pretty comfortable with that. Oh yeah, like my hui is the people that have sovereignty over me. That's like what I desire. But what happens when that's not the case? Because of this displacement, you know, these things are interlinked. There's a very good reason for the fake state of Hawaii to maintain a system in which once Hawaiians are expelled from Hawaii for whatever reason, they lose sovereignty, they lose access to the political mechanisms to reverse that pattern. And so, yeah, as we remember being outside of Hawaii, it's sort of, you know, when something has to change, right? Either we have to create mechanisms to allow Hānau to come back home to Hawaii, or to extend those political mechanisms. And yeah, I wonder in all these conversations about what sovereignty might look like, how Hawaiians maybe who are not in diaspora are thinking about us, or maybe even if they are at all. Yeah, sorry, that's really long-winded, but
Yeah, no need to apologize. Mahalo. Okay. So lots of feels are coming through, but I just you sparked something for me because I find myself especially when I was in diaspora, and I think everyone knows now my Aina is here in Puna, but born and raised on the continent. I exercised my sovereignty. I exercised my ea in learning my name. I mean, for me, that was like, I brought it really close to home in that for me, the first step was like, how do I say my name? And then from there, who is my kupuna? So for me, it showed up in like these just really close ways of like building pilina within myself. Yeah, so I just like offer that to the conversation as well, is what does this like, what does it look like in these close ways, and what does it look like in these broad ways as well? But yeah, Pumehana, really interested in hearing your thoughts about what does it mean to be sovereign in the diaspora.
Thanks, y'all. Yeah, I feel like you covered a lot of ground between the two of you. And I kind of have something to like speak to on both sides actually. Like for me, I had a similar experience, Jessica, like with my name. And I think, you know, so my full Hawaiian name is Kale Pumehana, and Kale I get from my auntie, Pumehana I get from my dad. And I was just recounting the story today of actually like I never really, so like typically, okay, so I was born here in Honolulu, but then grew up mostly in California and was back and forth a little bit between Hawaii Island and Oahu. And then now I'm obviously rooted in Oahu for the past like 7 years, so indefinitely. Forgot to mention that at the beginning, but so I've kind of had this like mixed experience. And for me, I wasn't really, you know, my full name doesn't like have its own meaning, right? Because it's two names combined, or two words combined. But even growing up like in California, I went by my you know, my English name. And so, but I never really had like a nickname. And I had this group of friends when I moved to the Bay that were like, you don't have a nickname, we should give you one. Like, what's your middle name? And I told them, and that's how I got the nickname Pume. And it actually wasn't here in Hawaii that happened. Like, it was my friends there that were like, and it almost started as a joke of like, because they didn't even know that name of mine, you know? But then I was like, man, I kind of like this, you know, and it's part of my dad's name. And so then it was interesting because when I moved back home, I was still going by Megan, or like kind of half. Like my friends back in California call me Pume, but my friends here were starting to get to know me by my English name. And then I made the shift again, and it's a little bit like half still now, but like typically, you know, I'll go by that. And I even was able to kind of like connect with other folks and like native speakers to like get like what they feel like the translation of my name is. And one of my coworkers, this is like one of my favorite ones, is she was like, that's one hug, like a warm lay, you know?
Yeah.
And that was, yeah, I don't know. I still think about that, you know, just like learning we're given these things, but we don't even always know the meaning. And it takes a while to kind of figure them out sometimes, you know? So that was one thing that came up for me for sure. And I think also like in terms of, I think sovereignty it's really interesting because I think it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, you know? And I think that like logistically, there's like kind of quite a divide in terms of like what people want or don't want, or like whether we want to be like, you know, internationally recognized in a certain way or not, or a part of a system or not a part of a system, right? But I think ultimately it's like kind of what you're getting at, Keone, of like us being able to like govern our own, you know, our aina, our rights, like what's happening in our homeland. And I think especially like something I think a lot about is Hawaiian homelands and how that's being distributed. Like for me, my dad passed, so I can't apply because I'm not like 50% or whatever. Maybe I am, I don't know, but I haven't done it. But you know, so we're trying to get like my aunties and uncles to apply, but then who can it be passed down to? Can it not? You know, if someone else passes away, can they even give it to the kids? We've had so much of our own family move away as well, because they can't afford to stay here. Even just very recently, we had like 4 family members move a few months ago. So, and they had land and now that's gone, right? So like thinking through like who even has control of the land here. I think about that all the time, especially with our waters right now. And I do think that part of it though is tied to solidarity as well. And, you know, thinking through some of the things we've talked about with our queen, of like the diplomacy of really like talking about Hawaii like internationally and garnering support in these ways. And I feel like we are doing that in a very indigenous way, like across the globe, you know, of like I see us like Kanaka standing for Native folks elsewhere and vice versa, you know, so many people coming to the Mauna for us and just really saying a hard no. And so I feel like, I don't know, for me, when I think of sovereignty, it's like really like saying no. Like a lot of these things of just being like no more, you know, from now moving forward.
Oh, I need to dig in there. So quick story. Recently, just recently, yesterday, actually, I had a conversation with somebody, and they basically said outright that Kanaka are not global people. And I was like, how dare you even say that, but let alone say it in Hawaiian History Month and the day before the Queen's birthday. You have the audacity. And I just, you know, said what I needed to say. I won't say it here because this is being recorded, but I said what I needed to say to really exercise my ea in that moment and establish a boundary and self-determine what I felt was needed to be said. So as I think about the Queen and her many travels, she was, yeah, a diplomat. She held all of these. She was a monarch. She was a philanthropist. She just, you know, worked with all of these various peoples just kind of globally, and it just reiterated that we are a global people. I asked this question of you both because I had to sit there and think after I put that man in his place. How do I see myself in the Queen? How do I see myself in all of her multiplicities? She was a monarch, she was a composer, she was a songwriter, she was amazing. And how do I see myself in her today? And in that moment, I felt like I was really digging into who she was, and said no, basically, pumehana, to this person. So yeah, I offer that question to you all. How do we see ourselves in the Queen today? And when I say to you all, I also mean to everyone joining us in this conversation as well. So feel free to drop your manao in the chat.
It's funny because actually I wasn't really like thinking of this before, but now kind of like thinking through all the different like hats that she wore, I feel like it's very exemplary of like Kanaka as a whole, of like we're very multifaceted peoples. And maybe that's just something like about BIPOC people in general, I don't know, but you know, I think for like anyone that I meet who's Kanaka can usually do like most of these things, like is involved in like government somehow, like activism, music, performance, leadership, you know, like, but I think people are very humble. So sometimes it takes like a long time to understand actually like the breadth of what people do. I think about that a lot, even like within my family. And circling back to even like myself, of when I feel, for me, like when I think I can't do something, or I feel, you know, like self-conscious or kind of the Hawaiian panic, as I've called it recently, of like, should I or should I not do this like Hawaiian thing or be involved in this Hawaiian space? I really do think about the Queen and just how brave she was when she led. and how like she really allowed like all of these different parts of herself to come forth. And I feel like that's kind of what I strive for. I think in my work with community, and education and creative work, like I think I really want folks to feel heard and uplifted. I want to feel that same way. Um, I feel like, you know, I strive to be um, a strong, yeah, kukulu, like support, you know, pillar for those around me, but also for myself. Um, and to push myself to think of what else I can do and what else I can try. Um, you know, I forget the exact quote, but the quote around like, you know, never cease to take action for fear of failing, you know.
Mhm.
I think about that every single time I'm like debating on whether or not I should take a new contract or, you know, do something creative or take a leap applying for a grant or fellowship or whatever. Um, and, you know, I'm just like, why not? I
Mm.
think I also feel like she's very strategic in how she led, and similar to like what we saw in the video, it's like she could have created this like so much pilikia, you know, the United States.
Absolutely. Mhm.
And instead she was like, no, I'm gonna negotiate this and I want this, this, and this for my people. And then like we'll meet your demands essentially, you know? And like what a sacrifice. Like what I can't even, I mean, it makes me emotional just thinking about like having to make those decisions. But she did that like for the greater good, you know?
Mm. I think about her often in the same ways that you were describing Pumehana. Yeah, I wanted to as a follow-up question, and Keone, you can jump in on any of these questions. But what lessons, and you started getting at this, Pumehana, what lessons have we learned from the Queen that we bring into our current work in our communities today? For me, I had, gosh, I had the privilege of working for Liliʻuokalani Trust recently in the last 2 years, and I was there for about a year doing community change work. And I cannot tell you, as a Hawaiian in diaspora who finally came home to my Pico, to work for the Queen, I just cried my first day on the job. I just cried and sobbed. Just to be able to be like in what felt like her presence in that work. And I realized too, I don't even know what I'm doing the day of, let alone next day. And our Queen established a trust to take care of her people in perpetuity. I mean, the sacrifices that you mentioned, Pumehana, the thoughtfulness, the foresight, all of it, I'm just in awe of, and I really try to hunker down and practice what I witnessed from her. And so, yeah, I offer that question up to you, Keone. What lessons have you learned in your work that you bring into your community, etc.? Yeah.
Yeah, that's oh man, that's a really good question. I mean, I so my academic background is in history because you know, one of my first introductions to being Hawaiian was learning about the overthrow and the Queen. And you know, it wasn't until like I mean, I was like 9 years old, right? And it probably wasn't until like 6, 7 years later that I learned the reason, you know, one of the big catalyzing events for the overthrow was her rewriting of you know, it wasn't just sort of random, spontaneous, like, oh, the Americans thought it was time, like, let's do it. It was because she was doing something. And I thought about a lot like, how the narrative that I had been introduced first was leaving that out. You know, they didn't talk about what the Queen was doing that caused it to happen. They they completely left that out. There's just this sort of thing that history happened to, and not a person that was an active agent within. And so, I think when I think back to that, and like, what narratives are we creating? Not only like when we awaken historical memory, but also like as we live today, right? We know that the Queen fought back against encroachment upon not only the sort of democratic institutions of the kingdom, but also like her own powers as the Mōʻī,
Mhm.
because she did it. You know, like we know that she left a legacy for that to happen. I think, um, as probably a lot of indigenous people have been told, especially young ones today, it's like, well, what kind of ancestor are you going to be? How are your descendants going to remember you? And I think that also kind of relates to maybe an answer to your other question about multiplicity, right? The Queen sort of having all of these um, roles, all these kuleana that she fulfilled. Um, and it's actually really funny. I have kind of like a weird, not the opposite, but kind of a funny anecdote that, so that I was preparing to be tattooed
Mm.
a couple weeks ago in Hawaii. And we were talking about my genealogy. And he asked me, oh, so what are you gonna do? Do you know? And it's funny because one of the lines of my family from Hānau, there's a birth chant that has been preserved from, it was recorded in like 1921, but we know that it comes from before then, probably 2 generations above him. When he recorded it, he was like 60, 70 years old. So he was very, very young. So it's probably very, very young,
Mm.
well, it is. One of the lines is really funny, because it goes like, he said, "Haʻimi pono na aipo ana, a o he no he mama lawai a, he mama mahi ai." And basically it means like, yeah, like our family, there's no fishermen, only farmers. What? And one of my goodness names or nicknames at least is Halavai Avalona Kai Manapa, which means like the unskilled fisherman of Manapa. And I was like, what? What the heck? I'm going around like telling people, oh, I'm Hawaiian, like my ancestors are like the best watermen, know how to fish, they know the ocean really well. And then my family is all farmers, no fishermen. I was like, what am I doing? Like, maybe I should do that, right? Um, but then the other side of my family, not from Hawaii, is the Palama family. And the Palama family has this pie, this ancestral pie, who, yeah, fish pond in Oahu. And there's, oh man, wait, so like, there's this fish pond, but then the other side of my family is like really bad fishermen. So what does that make me? Do I have to choose? But maybe I don't have to choose is the lesson, right? Is like, I don't have to be everything all at once, but together, right, with the melding of my hana, because they eventually would marry, those families would marry into each other. They could support, and the Lahui had that multiplicity that we're looking for. And so when I think about like all these things, all these kind things, like I have to do Buddha, I don't learn Hawaii, I have to learn history, all of these things. Literally, slow down, Kennedy, because you're not the only one on this journey. It's like a relay almost, like sometimes you just cannot. You can pass it on to people that are on your team. And I think that's a really important thing that I always forget. And that is one of the core tenets of being white, is knowing that you can rely on those other people. Maybe you're the unskilled fisherman, but at least you can marry into a fish pond family, and everything will be fine. You have everything you need, right? So I think about that a lot. It's like, well, I there's a lot of things I don't know. But I can I can fill in the gaps where, other people might not know. They'll fill in my gaps. And as a lot, we have every that abundance that we need. I mean, in the meantime, I'm gonna try both fishing and farming, see which one likes me better. But I always thought that's such a funny part of my family history. So there's one really bad fisherman, and we're probably gonna remember him forever. So,
That's hilarious. Kupuna are so funny. Oh, that was good, Kioni. Gosh, I had so many thoughts come through. I think I'll just go with the one that's kind of resounding the most. But I offer this to the crew too that is joining us today. Back to the man that had the audacity to say that we are not a global people. Back to that moment that I had, in my response, I can't tell you how I was like, as a Wahine in diaspora, I often show up with like a lot of uncertainty about how Hawaiian I am, right? Just to keep it 100. I often feel like I'm not Hawaiian enough for this space. I don't olelo enough. I don't like practice enough. I always am saying like I'm not enough, not enough. In that moment, I was the most Kanaka I've ever been in my life. I was like, no, I refuse to hear what you're saying. And no, we're not doing that today. And so I offer this to all of you in those spaces or in those interactions, big and small, is when have you felt the most Kanaka? And maybe even a step further, when have you felt the most connected to our queen? Yeah.
I think for me, I've had a lot of people pass in my life, and my dad passed when I was very young. And that was really my tie to my Kanaka-ness. And so for me, I think it's been an interesting journey because when I talk to him, I feel also very connected to our queen. And I almost feel like when I talk to her, I'm talking to him too. Like it feels like I feel the connection from her to like so many other kupuna, you know? And I think I've felt that more personally since being back, on Aina in Hawaii. But I also just feel like the more I learn about her, the more I feel like I have been connected to her, and we are all connected to her and her legacy, and her dreams and hopes for our people, I think another time when, this whole conversation and even prepping for this, I haven't been able to stop thinking about my time on the Mauna. And I was there for, a couple weeks. And really, honestly, what stood out the most to me was how accessible learning was together. Like, Ike Kupuna was everywhere,
Right.
and it was open. And it's exactly like you're saying. I feel like any Kanaka I met who came up had that internal dialogue. Should I be there? Should I not? Like, what's my kuleana? Like, am I even meant to go to this place? And it was interesting because not everyone, my friends who are not Kanaka, did not always ask that question. And so I'm like, if you're not asking this question, you definitely should not be coming. Like, because if we're asking this question, you better be asking this question. You know what I mean? Like,
Yes.
I definitely told people I knew, like, don't come. What's your kuleana? What are you doing? Okay, don't come then. Like, because, if we're out here, like, I'm not Hawaiian enough to like answer the kahea for my people, like, just think about your place,
Right.
But even still, like, just in general, it felt so like I was also nervous to go up, and when I did, I just felt so embraced. And like it was okay that I didn't know the oli. It was okay that I didn't know the hula. Like it was very welcome to just jump in, just try until you get it. And it was like that for everyone. Everyone who came, it was like just come, learn, try, and just be here,
And I feel like that's something that I've really been missing since that time, of like this openness of, you know, I think that sometimes like our culture and our practices, we kind of gatekeep them, and for good reason, right? I think there's a balance of like protecting, but also like being open as well. And I think that I think back a lot to that time of just like how people who had never been Kanaka, who had never been to Hawaii, came home, you know? And like this one dude I'll never forget, he brought his little girl, and they came with their rolly suitcases, and we're just like, we're here until you don't need us. And they came, you know, from the West Coast. And just that's something I really wish for us, like moving forward, is I wish for us that we have to ask that question less, you know, like that those feelings come up for us less, of like if we're Hawaiian enough, if we should or shouldn't be in the spaces, because I think it's specifically us who are questioning that, you know, to ourselves. And the people who maybe shouldn't be in those spaces are not asking those questions. So yeah, but I went on a tangent.
No. You're like on point. Oh, so many feels. I wish that for us as well. Less questioning of ourselves, less oppressive thoughts. Because for me, that's, yeah, I know that's coming from an oppressive place, and I need to, yeah, I wish that for all of us. Keone, what you got? I know you get something to that question. I like leave some space for it.
No, I mean, I was really struggling with trying to figure out an answer to this question. But Pume, something, you know, and that's what you're commenting about. I mean, you know, in my thesis about diaspora, one of the big themes that I found was that diaspora Hawaiians, especially ones that grow up out here, is they display like, sometimes it's like really like this big self-doubt that's kind of productive, but a lot of other times it's really like that you know, that asking the question, what is my kuleana? Is it here? Maybe not. And then the ability to understand that the answer might be no, is such a tough one, you know, and but it's such a paradox, right? Because if you're too then you do not enter spaces at all, and then you don't have the you know, the experience to then be invited into the next space, you know. And so I think that's something I struggle with is, oh shucks, like, okay, I don't know if I'm supposed to like be in this space, but if they're like, okay, everybody who was in that space can come to the next space. Well, shucks, like I want to go. I want to be a part of it, you know, and I don't want to have this like endless self-doubt. So what is the balance then, you know? And I think one of the things that I have felt really, one of the times I felt really Hawaiian has been those times where I had probably just been silent for like 4 hours, and then like, an auntie or uncle says, what are you doing? Get over here. Like, you're supposed to be in this conversation. I was like, oh, all right. You know, but, and they act all kind of like, you know, like, who about it, but I know that that's them acknowledging, I guess, in a way, like that humility is part of the what gets you invited into these spaces. And so, you know, when I was in Hawaii working with an island organization of Ulumapuanui this last summer, there was a lot of those moments where the folks that I was working with, they're like, what are you doing? You're standing on the side. You're supposed to be over here. And I was like, oh my God, are you sure? And yeah, I think that those are those times where I have felt the most Hawaiian in the sense that like I breathe a sigh of relief, you know, like this is kind of like dawn on me. This is something that I feel a lot of times that and maybe not, maybe I'm listening, but Hawaiians that grow up in Hawaii, these are lessons that they are taught from a very young age. Not to be Moho'oloi and, not to ask like any kind of questions, because there are stupid questions in Hawaiian culture. But those times where that humility kind of pays off a little bit. So there's that, and then there's another moment that comes to mind, and I'm trying to get short. But 4 years ago, I was in a field program that my university has in Hawaii for a term, and they take all these students from my college, and it's an environmental science program. But this was a little bit before I knew like my Liliʻuokalani in like depth, like past my great grandparents. And so I knew my family name. So I literally just went to everyone I saw and like, hey, do you know the Palama? And the Palamas, I have realized, are a giant family. Like my great grandfather had like 14 kids. They all had 14 kids. They're Mormon. Of course, they're gonna have 1,000 descendants. So they're like, yeah, I know that family, but it's still family. But so I went around last day, and it was kind of hard. I kept hitting dead ends. Like no one, like people knew of the family, but didn't have specific connections. And then one of the days we went to work at a Mōʻī in Kona at a Mōʻī called Public, and there was some local folks that were working there, and at the end of the workday, we sit down to eat, and we had this like really beautiful conversation. And as we're saying aloha to to leave and say goodbye, this uncle just started wrapping in his arms, and we had all introduced ourselves, to the and to each other, and during my introduction, I like kind of started crying because I was like, the only thing I know about where my family comes from in Hawaii specifically is that we're from Kona, and here we were in Kona. And I didn't really know anything besides that. And so I just said that with the hope that maybe, it's like casting out your fishing plant, right? Maybe I get something. But anyways, at the end of this day, we're saying goodbye to everybody. And his uncle just wraps me in his arms, and I didn't even have to ask, like, do you know my family or anything like that. He just said, well, I'm home. And I mean, I had never been to Kona, that was my very first time being in that place. And to be acknowledged in that way, I mean, that is just like, I can't describe it. It's like all these doors open, and I didn't know what was behind those doors, but it's okay because they're open for me. And I will never ever forget that. 2 words, welcome home. And I don't even know if he remembers, just like this little thing that she said. And yeah, I mean, the fact that this place can be my home, it's a place I've never been to, like 18 years old, like I've never been to, and I think that's the time I felt most is one of those times was, and all these other times after of that recognition. Now people do know, like, they're like, oh, Palama family, like, yeah, Uncle Jeffrey, what? Oh my God, cool. I never had that. My Hawaiian family's, like my immediate family, my branch of the family is very small. My mom has no siblings. So I can't do that thing. Like, oh yeah, oh my cousins. I have 0 cousins, This is very unusual for a Hawaiian family. So to have those pieces of recognition, oh yeah, I know who they are. I live right next to them. Cool. I actually am Hawaiian. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Keone, I made it through today's talk with no crocodile tears, and you just got me. I got it through the video without crying, and you just got me. Welcome home.
Me too.
Welcome home. I'm cognizant of time. Gosh, I could sit here with you both and everyone else. And actually, Epic, we should do another one of these. But I'm gonna actually leave a kahea for everyone out there who's joined us today and those who will be watching this later on. And I'm going to ask this question that Keone actually experienced himself, is what aina and kupuna make you feel most connected to your Kanaka-ness? What aina and kupuna tell you those two words, welcome home, essentially? Gosh, okay, I'll stop there. I just want to offer a mahalo first and foremost to the Queen and all of her aloha she has for her people to this day. We got connected through the Queen, and so her work and her efforts to just maintain pilina amongst her people is evident. Here we are. I want to mahalo the Queen. Mahalo Epic, of course, for doing this. This is awesome. I was so happy to get this invitation. Super stoked to meet you two through this experience. Pumehana and Keone. Kiki in the background there, mahalo to you. She is awesome. She's dropping in links into the chat right now. So just a reminder, go Hawaii Pono'i Coalition. There's plenty of programming happening right now, both virtually and in person. Yeah, she's dropping a couple other other resources in there as well. My number one favorite person to follow on Instagram, and you might all feel the same way, is Adam Keawe. So shout out to Adam and all of his really cool posts. Has one up today with 20 interesting facts around the Queen that I actually did not know. I didn't even know half of those. So I suggest you go out there. Any mahalos that you want to drop in, Pumehana and Keone? Otherwise, we can close today's session. Yeah.
I'll just couple everything you said. Thanks so much, Brittany, for having your camera on and your Kiki there. It's so nice to see them and you. And I wanted to also offer just one more kind of thought and a reflection on what Keone was sharing of like, you know, I think that through colonization and the colonial project, we've really been taught that we need to do things individually. And I feel like what you're getting at, Keone, is like this embrace, you know, and this like community that we have in and out of diaspora. And I feel like that's really waiting for all of us. Like we're all waiting to be welcomed home, and we're all like waiting to welcome others home. And that can be anywhere, you know, in any kind of way. And so that's kind of what I'm going to be thinking about as I leave here, like those times where I felt that and been embraced, like very far from our aina, but still feeling like that connection. So I just want to mahalo you for everything you were sharing too, and bringing that to the forefront. And as mahalo Kiki, mahalo Jessica for facilitating, and everyone for joining us. Has been so special.
Yeah. Sorry. I just also wanted to say mahalo to Epic for having me, mahalo to Jessica, Kiki, and our Wahine. And yeah, I guess a super last closing thought is that, you know, that quote from Joseph Alahi, you know, right? Like, who is your mother? Who is your grandmother? Indeed, it is the land, but it's not land, it's aina, you know, that which nourishes us. And I think that quote is really meaningful too, because our Wahine is aina. You know, our mothers are aina. They are the ones that nourish us. And whether that's in Hawaii or here, you know, and so aina, you know, that which nourishes is the pilina that I take with me, and that have raised me, whether I'm in Hawaii or not. And so I mahalo to all of my aina who have nourished me and brought me to this place. And this conversation has nourished me. So, mahalo to you.
Mahalo nui, gang. Ah, such good stuff. Yeah, Kiki, we'll end with how we started. So let's listen to the mele of the Queen, if you don't mind. I'll stick around for a couple minutes if folks want to stick around with me and like ask any questions. Otherwise, we just mahalo you all again for your time, energy, and for bringing your kupuna into the space with you. So mahalo nui, a hui ho.